Well, evening. This is Jody Murray, and I'm here with Marek, and we just saw the opening game of the season. The Dogs playing Abilene Christian, and Mark, what kind of a takeaway do you get from a game like this?
I mean, I think this was the kind of game that Fresno State wanted. You know, they had a team an opponent they were better than. They clearly beat them down. You know, it wasn't a complete blowout, but they made enough good plays that the game was never really in doubt. I mean, it was a 14-point game, maybe threatening to be 7 at one point in the second quarter, but the defense prevented it from getting into the end zone. I think it was a pretty solid performance overall. They did some good things, and they did some things that weren't so good, which, you know, the coaching staff will have a whole week, you know, and a few days to harp on before Ole Miss. Now, what happens this week, you know, I think has no bearing on what happens next week in Ole Miss. But there were a few encouraging things that we saw today that might come into play, you know, when they're playing teams, you know, they're on there a little more on their level in Mountain West Conference play.
Everyone's going to wonder whether tonight helped answer any questions at all about the quarterback situation.
I think it did a little bit because, you know, we had 4 quarterbacks, you know, including Kelton Anderson, 4 Childress that really hadn't played. They had, you know, Fresno State does not hit quarterbacks in practice. They don't go live, you know, so this is the first time that, you know, they were actually threatened, you know, with bodily harm, these quarterbacks. Yeah. So Zack Greenlee on his first drive, you know, he avoided a sack. You know, maybe another guy had to, you know, reach at him. He rolled out to his right. I mean, he showed kind of level-headedness. He found the open receiver down there at the 2. Guy brought it into the end zone, you know, was challenged a little bit. So that kind of shows me something because, you know, that's a play that, you know, he doesn't have to make in practice. I mean, he does, but there's no threat of him ever getting hit. Yeah. So, you know, last year when he started for the Wyoming game, you could tell the kind of stage was too big for him. He was a little bit overwhelmed by everything. He was not that way today. You know, he looked a little bit more calm and composed, and he made some good throws. His second touchdown pass to Josiah Blandon, it was a perfect throw. I mean, it had to be in a tight window. It was really well covered. And so he made some throws. But other times, you know, he was a little bit inaccurate. If you look at the final stats right here, he's 14 of 32. Well, that's not going to cut it. I mean, below 50%. In this offense, you better be 60%, you know, especially with some of the high, you know, kind of high percentage throws this offense has.
So what about just maybe a minute or two on just defense? I mean, what kind of a barometer were we able to
You know, the 3 things I was going to look for today is, you know, A, missed tackles. We've seen those a lot the last couple of years. I didn't see any of those really today. Okay? Are they going to get beat deep by balls over the head secondary? I don't think that happened today. You know, the longest play was 22 yards. Okay. And then the third thing I was looking for is, are the outside linebackers, you know, 3-4 defense, the outside linebackers, the edge rushers, those are supposed to be your disruptors. Those are the people that wreak havoc. And that wasn't happening last year at all. Well, they had 3 of the 4 sacks, 2 of the interceptions. I mean, so there's, you know, by the linebackers, at least 2 of the interceptions, right? Yeah, so, I mean, the linebackers played well today, and that's really going to be a key. You know, seeing some of the freshmen, James Bailey in there, I mean, I think he's like 210 pounds. I mean, he's kind of like a safety out there, kind of a linebacker hybrid safety. And, you know, he played a little bit. I mean, some of the linebackers, Brandon Hughes laid the wood on somebody at one point. Edgerow, you know, had a nice interception, which raising both hands above his head, he wouldn't be able to do that.
Look what he can do now.
Look what he can do. So, I mean, I kind of like, from a defensive perspective, it was really encouraging. Again, they're playing Abilene Christian, but, you know, this team has a decent passing game. The quarterback, you know, he could move around and make some plays. He made a couple throws on the run, so they weren't like some terrible opponent, but certainly not along the lines of what Fresno State's going to see the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Next week, slightly different rodeo.
Slightly different in Ole Miss. And then Utah, a very tough physical team that beat Michigan today. It's going to be a very tough game here. You know, that's going to be a real physical game.